What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hutch Coming in Clutch. I'm your host, Hutchison Brown, and today we've got a fantastic show. We are preparing for battle for Week 5 of the 2025 NFL Fantasy Football season. Today we got a jam-packed show. Before we get into it, please follow me on Twitter. I'm at HutchisonB_FF. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you'll be notified every single time a new episode does drop. And don't forget, check out me over at Football Guys, doing a ton of work over there. So make sure you check me out. So without further ado, let's get into the podcast today. We are going to start with some injury updates and talk about bye weeks. Now that bye weeks have started, I'm going to make sure to update you on who's on bye, who do you need to look out for on bye, who do you need to get out of your lineup. So we're start there. We have 4 teams on bye this week in Week 5: the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And a couple notes about these bye weeks. Bye weeks are things where not only obviously the team off and you got to take that player out of your fantasy lineup, but bye weeks for NFL teams are times where things can change. You have a week off to regroup, reconvene, and adjust some things. And especially when it comes to rookie players or younger players potentially looking to make a step up, or maybe a quarterback that's playing poorly, you need to switch things up, or a player that's really playing poorly, you need to make a switch and make someone else a starter. This is where that happens. So a couple things you need to look out for here. One is Matthew Golden. He really has flashed in the last couple of weeks with 2 straight 50-plus yard performances, 2 straight 4-plus catch performances, been running a decent amount of routes. It wouldn't be shocking at all if a first-round pick and Matthew Golden got more usage in Week 6, fresh off a bye week. So keep an eye on that. The Chicago Bears, DJ Moore is definitely out on the trade block. I mean, there hasn't been any rumors or crazy reports about it yet, but this dude is just not fitting in this offense right now. And I would not be shocked at all if the Bears were to trade DJ Moore. So keep an eye on that over this bye week for to see more reports about that. And then Pittsburgh Steelers will be interesting. Keep an eye on Jalen Warren. Does he get healthy? Really would love to see that. And then Atlanta Falcons, I mean, nothing much here, man. I just would love to see this offense pick up from where they left off after last week's big game with Drake London going off, Michael Penix getting it back together. Would love to see them carry the momentum into future weeks. Now, let's head into the injury updates, starting with the quarterback position. Run through these just to make sure you know what's going on in the NFL world right now. Brock Purdy for the 49ers. He is out for Thursday Night Football against the Rams. Mac Jones will make the start. Lamar Jackson for the Ravens is expected to miss Week 5 with a hamstring strain. He's expected to miss the next 2 to 3 weeks. So Cooper Rush is in line to start against the Texans this week and for the next 2 to 3 weeks as Lamar Jackson attends to that hamstring injury. So that's going to be an interesting situation for fantasy purposes. And, you can't really know what's going to happen until you really see it. And Joe Burrow out on IR, obviously. He still remains out. There's been no updates here on him. It's probably still going to be the next 3 months. Now, looking at Jayden Daniels, encouraging news for him. He practiced in full with that knee. He's expected to play on Sunday against the Chargers, and he's back in fantasy lineups, man. The Chargers are not necessarily the worst defense in the world, but these are 2 really talented offenses. This should be a relatively higher scoring game, like, at least 45 points plus scored. And that puts Jayden Daniels in a situation to score good fantasy points. So he's right back in fantasy lineups as a solid QB1 option. And then JJ McCarthy, still not participating in practice, still going to be out this week, looking like Carson Wentz is going to make another start for the Minnesota Vikings. Looking at the running back position, Trey Benson, this was unfortunate one. It kind of came out of nowhere. He is out with a knee. He's being put on IR. He's going to miss the next 4 to 6 weeks. So hopefully it's more like 4, but it could be 6. We'll have to see. On IR, going to miss at least the next 4 games. So Amari DiMercato, Michael Carter are the 2 next backup backs. I personally would prefer Michael Carter. I think he's a more talented back of these 2, but you can't really know until you see it on the field. Hopefully one is able to separate themselves from the other and make it clear for fantasy purposes, but it might just be a gross split. Now let's look at the rest of the running backs here. Braylon Allen for the Jets. He had a really brutal leg injury on the kickoff return. We talked about that. He's probably going to miss the next handful of games. He's not practicing right now, so he's probably out. Breece Hall, upgraded workload for him. Chuba Hubbard for the Panthers did not participate in practice. He's questionable for the week. I think he'll play, but he could have a potentially more limited workload. We saw that in the week prior against the Patriots, but that was mostly due to a blowout game, I think. I think Chuba Hubbard, if he's starting, he's in your fantasy laps, so RB2/flex play. And then Tyron Tracy, still not participating in practice. That shoulder injury still projected to be out for a bit. Tony Pollard for the Titans, limited participation in practice. Now, this is big because Tyjae Spears is coming back soon. If Tony Pollard were to miss this week and lose momentum, Tyjae Spears coming back off IR pretty soon could be huge for fantasy purposes. Tony Pollard for me right now is a big time sell candidate. I know he hasn't played very well, but the volume has been there and the fantasy points have been all right, especially the last couple of weeks where he's seen some targets. Tyjae Spears is going to return. This offense is still poor. It's not a sell high moment, but it's a moment where you should sell because Spears coming back could completely change how this backfield looks. We saw that last year towards the end of the season, the last like 3 to 5 games. We really saw Spears get very involved, especially as a receiver, and it dramatically impacted Tony Pollard's fantasy value. Now, looking at Bucky Irving, he's in crutches and practice right now, not really practicing at all, just kind of hanging out. Not good to see that. He suffered an injury against the Eagles. It was kind of undisclosed, a little ambiguity here. We don't really fully know what's happening, but I would not expect him to play this week. I think you're gonna have to find other options. So Rachaad White, if he's on your waiver wire, go pick him up. Sean Tucker, if he's on your waiver wire, go pick him up in deeper leagues. And if you need to start one of these two guys, you're definitely starting Rachaad White. He has more PPR upside, but Sean Tucker, at least keep an eye on him as well. Now let's go to the wide receiver position. Tyreek Hill for the Dolphins out for the season. Obviously, dislocated knee, multiple ligaments torn. Look, man, at 30 plus years old, what we were already starting to see with Tyreek Hill, I don't want to call this the end of his NFL career because that might be a little too forward. But in terms of fantasy football dominance, this might be the end of Tyreek Hill, unfortunately. We'll have to see, how he recovers, how he comes back for next year. But man, just prayers up for him in his recovery process because that was a brutal injury. Hope he's doing all right now, man. But then Malik Neighbors, out for the season, torn ACL. You got to find another option. Drop Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wanda Robinson, Theo Johnson, all become intriguing options in this offense now led by Jackson Dart. Who will he target? We'll have to see. It seemed like Slayton was the one that stepped in the most, along with Wanda Robinson, and then a little sprinkle of Theo Johnson. But definitely keep an eye on this situation as we go forward without Malik Neighbors. And now let's talk about Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. So not only are the 49ers missing George Kittle and Brock Purdy, but they are also missing Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall and Brandon Ayuk still. So this offense is completely dismantled health-wise. You're looking at Mac Jones starting. You're looking at Christian McCaffrey at running back. And you're looking at Jake Tongs as probably the lead receiver for the team. We'll talk about him later in the show. I'm going to like him for fantasy this week. And then Christian McCaffrey, his current over-under receptions on DraftKings at 6.5. I like the over there. And also something we're going to start sprinkling some DraftKings picks. I like that. I've been doing that a lot lately. I like what I'm doing there, and I've been pretty good at it. So I'm trying to sprinkle that in a little bit of the show. So Chris McCaffrey 6.5. I like the over there on that one. So look at CeeDee Lamb, not participating in practice, still out. Calvin Ridley did not participate in practice. Hopefully he's able to play, but we're not sure. But even if he is playing, likely not putting him in my fantasy lineups right now. And then Cedric Tillman did injure his hamstring. He got placed in IR pretty quickly. He's probably going to miss at least 4 games. Now, this definitely gives opportunity for the rest of the receiver room to earn targets. But with Dylan Gabriel now as a starting quarterback, we don't know what's going on. So that's something to keep an eye on. And at tight end position, Tyler Higbee for the Rams, doubtful for Thursday Night Football. This gives an opportunity for other receivers to make more relevance. So Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua get a bump up. Jordan Whittington, I don't think anyone's in a position they want to start Jordan Whittington, but maybe as a sneaky DFS play with Tyler Higbee out, there's open opportunity here. Juwan Johnson did not practice. Taysom Hill, though, is back at practice, and he's set to play. This is huge, and we're going to talk about this later for fantasy football as well on my Fudge players of the week. Now, talking about Noah Fant, limited participation in the concussion protocol. He might not play this week. Mason Taylor, limited participation. We saw him have a bit of a breakout game against the Jets, against the Dolphins. It went a bit under the radar, but he seems to be establishing himself as the number 2 target for the New York Jets with Justin Fields in. And Justin Fields is dealing right now, man. He's at a 73% completion percentage right now. He's doing really well with the limited pass attempts he's getting. Mason Taylor has plenty of room in this offense to be fantasy relevant. So keep an eye on him. Hopefully he plays this week. And if he is, he's definitely a solid tight end 2 play. If you're looking for 2 tight ends in your league or maybe a desperate flex play in a PPR scoring format, you can absolutely go ahead and throw Mason Taylor in if you need it. And now lastly, David Njoku, limited participation in practice. This gives a small bump up to Harold Fannin, but the receiving room for the Browns is pretty questionable this week because of Dylan Gabriel starting. Now, that's it for the injuries. Let's talk about my coming in clutch or O-Fudge players of the week. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be open a little bit here. I did it on Twitter this week. I I try to go deeper this week in these, and I'm going to do that going forward because I noticed the first 4 weeks I was at just above a 50 to 55% hit rate on these, which is not acceptable. Like that's just not high enough. That simply isn't it. And I'm gonna get better at this. I mean, it's simply a weird start to the season for me, but we're locking in now. Let's go. So the first one, we're talking about Justin Fields against Dallas Cowboys. This is more of a chalk pick for this week, but I just kind of want to say this and establish that Justin Fields should be starting in fantasy football every single week. Like I mentioned with the Mason Taylor news, he is dealing right now. I mean, 73% completion percentage in 2 healthy games, 129 rushing yards in 2 healthy games, 5 total touchdowns in 2 healthy games. And I know everyone's going to look at that concussion game and say, oh, we really struggled there, though. You look back at the film, you look back at where he got hit. He got concussed early in that game and tried to play through it. He was playing concussed. So I completely threw that game away. Do not pay attention to that game. The 2 games that he was fully healthy are the ones you really look at. And those 2 games, he's like quarterback 1 in points per game. He's absolutely monstrous for fantasy. Like it's just simple. When Justin Fields is on the field, he's a monster for fantasy football. And I don't get what people weren't seeing. I mean, I was all in on him this offseason. Like he has the best weapons of his career, arguably one of the best coaches of his career, one of the best systems of his career. And he's more polished as a quarterback because he's been in multiple systems now. Like it's just it's simple. He's an elite fantasy quarterback. He should be started every week. And now he's matched up with Dallas to have a great offense. Dak is dealing right now, but they can't guard anything on defense. So this is going to be a great game for Fields. Now, let's talk about my running back coming in clutch player of the week. He's been struggling a little bit so far this year. He's been a little bit on and off. I think he's actually a potential trade candidate from his team. But I'm talking about Alvin Kamara against the New York Giants. I think this is going to be a let's display Alvin Kamara game for Alvin Kamara. The Giants have allowed an RB to score a touchdown every single week. They're allowing 1.5 rushing touchdowns per game to the position. And Kamara is a player where he's looking really efficient on the ground. He's getting receiving work. And this is a game where you just have a great matchup with the Giants defense that allows a lot of points. I think this is just a smash matchup for Alvin Kamara. This is not only a statistical thing, as the Giants are really bad against the run, but this is just a gut call that I think the Saints are going to be looking to trade Alvin Kamara soon, and they're going to want to display him for the player that he is. The last couple of weeks have been, okay, let's see what we have in Kendrick Miller. I think the next couple of weeks are to be like, let's show off Alvin Kamara a little bit. Let's get his trade price a little up. Now, wide receiver, we're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. as my coming in clutch player of the week. I feel really nervous about this one. I'm not going to lie, because Marvin Harrison Jr. and coming in clutch are not 2 things you want to say in the same sentence. So far this year, Harrison has had a couple major drops. A couple of them had led to interceptions. It's just been a brutal start to the year so far for him. However, what I will say, this last week, when he played against the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football, he ran a route short, and as a result, got intercepted. He had a drop, and as a result, it got intercepted. But he came back in that game in the second half and had a phenomenal finish. And he ended up with 6 catches, 60-plus yards, and he got a nice touchdown. Absolutely mossed a guy. Great play. And he got emotional after it. He had a really nice bounce back, and I'm expecting him to carry that momentum this week against the Tennessee Titans. Their defense has been absolutely abysmal this year because their offense can't score points. So their defense is constantly on the field, and they're constantly letting up points, especially in the run game, but as well in the pass game. You look at L'Jarius Sneed, their number 1 corner. He has played awful this year on the outside. Cortland Sutton, the primary Broncos outside receiver, went 6 for 61 and 1 against this team. And then Devontae Adams, 6 for 106 and 1 against this team. And then you have Michael Pittman, 6 for 73 and 1 against his team. And lastly, Nico Collins in a blowout game. It was 26-0. The Texans were running the football a lot. We didn't see a lot of Collins in the second half, but he went 4 for 79, had a huge play. Like, L'Jarius Sneed is getting absolutely cooked right now. I don't know what happened to him because he was dominant in KC, but left KC, came to the Titans, and it's just been a disaster ever since. He hasn't been the same player. And you can see in the way he's talking in the locker room and post-game interviews, he just doesn't have the same energy that he did in Kansas City. It really doesn't feel like it. So when you have a wide receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr., who's tall, who's fast, who's athletic, who can make those big plays downfield, where against a corner that's getting burnt constantly by these big downfield defenders on the outside, I think you got a match made in heaven for Marvin Harrison Jr. to have a great game this week. I would love to see what his anytime touchdown odds are. I don't know what they are yet. DraftKings hasn't fully released all those things yet, or most of the betting sites haven't, but it's probably in the plus 200 range. I think that's a really solid bet for this week. Now, let's talk about tight end. I mentioned this earlier, hinted at it. Jake Tongs is my coming in clutch tight end of the week against the Los Angeles Rams. I feel weird about this one too because Jake Tongs is a backup tight end, and calling him a coming in clutch player of the week. I'm putting my head out there. I'm putting my neck on the line this week with Jake Tongs. Looking at the situation for San Francisco right now, Juwan Jennings, Slicky Ricky Pearsall, and George Kittle / Brandon Ayuk are on AR. As simple as that. Like, you got every single option out here except Christian McCaffrey, surprisingly. And he's going to get a ton of receiving work, but you have to have somebody other than your running back get receiving work. And that's going to be Jake Tongs, man. He's had multiple productive games this year. He's had 12 catches overall in the season, 2 touchdowns, has had multiple games of 10 plus PPR points. And now looking at the Rams, they're below average in yards, catches, targets, and touchdowns allowed to the time position. All 4 categories they're below average in. And that also fantasy points per game, they're bottom 12. So it's a match made in heaven. You got a good matchup, a lot of passing opportunity, and a good matchup. So easy. I think I said good matchup twice, but that's okay. My Fudge players of the week this week at quarterback, I'm going with Jared Goff against the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm really surprised. The line opened at 10.5 points. We're gonna have to push that up a little bit. The Lions are going to absolutely dominate this team. I mean, Jake Brown is still currently the starting quarterback as we know it, and it is not good. They have scored 3 and 10 points, the Bengals have, in 2 full games with Jake Browning. We know what the Lions offense can do. We know the Cincinnati Bengals defense is not that good, and they're constantly tired now because they're on the field so often with Jake Browning at the quarterback position now. So this Lions team is going to dominate. And looking at Jared Goff, he's in 63% of sleeper lineups right now. That's a lot of lineups, and I want to get him out. The Lions are going to run all over this team, like I said, and in those kind of games, you're running the ball with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and Jared Goff will likely throw it 25 times, probably complete like 15 to 20 of them, probably get a couple hundred yards and a touchdown. Like, that's kind of probably the game we're looking at for him. I see at max like a couple hundred yards and a couple touchdowns, and that's going to be barely a QB1. So I think that's kind of his ceiling this week because of how good the Lions will probably do against this Bengals team. So I'm just out against Jared Goff. I just the game script's not going to work out for him as a passer this week. Now, I'll start with Jordan Mason against the Cleveland Browns. He is my Fudge running back this week. Now, this is not a mandatory sit because Jordan Mason does have the lead role. And a lot of people out there, if they lost Aaron Jones or they have running back injuries, you might have no choice but to start Jordan Mason. I completely understand. But I'd be looking at your lineup saying, how could I get Jordan Mason out of it? You know, if I were to rank running backs right now, Jordan Mason's probably not my top 24 this week because looking at what he does, he has not scored 11 PPR points this season without a touchdown. He's extremely reliant on touchdowns because it doesn't get a lot of receiving work. He doesn't get the passing down work very often. We've seen the last couple weeks a little bit with a couple receptions, but overall, it's just he is very, very low ceiling in the receiving game. And efficiency wise, I just don't see it coming against this Cleveland Browns defense on the ground. They have allowed one running back this year to go for 50 plus yards, and that was this past week with Jahmyr Gibbs, who ran for 91 yards in them. But they have faced King Henry. They have faced Josh Jacobs. They have faced Chase Brown. They have faced David Montgomery this year. They have faced some really seriously good running backs, and only Jahmyr Gibbs went for 50 plus rushing yards on this team. So Jordan Mason's rushing lines at 69.5 right now, definitely going to take the under there and definitely benching him because I think to score like 8 points this week, he's going to need a touchdown. And that's just not a player you want to start in fantasy football unless you're absolutely desperate. Now, let's talk about the wide receiver position. I'm going to make this one simple. The Cleveland Brown wide receivers you want to sit this week. I mean, not only have they not been good this year overall with Joe Flacco quarterback, but now you have a new quarterback here in Dylan Gabriel. While Joe Flacco was pretty bad, I could see it getting a lot worse with Dylan Gabriel. He was a very, very flawed prospect coming out. Barely put it together at like 25 years old after 6 years in college at Oregon, moved around to a bunch of different schools. He's a runner as well, not afraid to take off and run the football. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Jackson Dart-like performance where he has 10 rush attempts. Like, I just not feeling interested in any of these Cleveland Browns wide receivers this week. I would keep an eye on them and see if he finds a favorite target. You know, Isaiah Bond has been increasing in his target share over the last 2 weeks in his snap share. Jerry Judy's always there. He had a lot of talent flash last year. He's flashed a little bit of that this year, but not as heavily. And then you have Harold Fan Jr., David Njoku, 2 very solid and capable tight ends on this team. So keep an eye on who Dylan Gabriel seems to like, but don't put any of them in your lineup. I think that's way too risky for this week, especially considering that the game is international. Now, lastly, At tight end, my fudge tight end for the week is Juwan Johnson. Now, Juwan Johnson, he had 3 receptions last week against the Buffalo Bills in that it wasn't a blowout game, but it was a very clear Buffalo win. Juwan Johnson was not able to get it done, and he gets a matchup this week with the Giants, who they're bad against running backs, but against the tight end position, they're not a great matchup. They're actually below average in terms of fantasy points and receptions given up to the tight end position this year. And looking at Taysom Hill, he's coming in. And I understand people are going to say Taysom Hill works a lot in the running game and passing. He doesn't do a lot of the other stuff. But one thing I will say, he takes a lot of red zone opportunity. He runs in touchdowns on a very regular basis. And this team has gotten wacky with his usage. They've used him in the receiving game. They use him in the running game. They just give him opportunities. And it seems like Chris Olave is the clear-cut wide receiver one. He is among the NFL leaders in targets right now. He's clear and far away the wide receiver one of this team. Taysom Hill is likely not going to eat into his target share. They're likely going to continue to prioritize their clear-cut wide receiver one in New Orleans. What they're going to do, though, Taysom Hill could eat into Rashid Shaheed, and he could eat into Juwan Johnson's workload. And as a result, I think Juwan Johnson's somebody that people have started a lot in fantasy that you want to sit this week. I talked about on the Tuesday show, but if you can still trade him away right now, I would do that because a lot of people still value him as a top tier tight end. You know, they see the 10-4, 10-5 rank that's on his name right now, and they look at the fantasy points he's had, the volume he's had. It's really easy just to scan those stats and just be like, yeah, I want Juwan Johnson. I'll give you a solid wide receiver 2 or something like that. I need the tight end position filled for me this week or this year right now with an injury. Like, go and see what you can do with Juwan Johnson. You might be able to get a solid trade return. But that's going to be it for my Coming in Clutch and Fudge players of the week. And now look, unfortunately this week we do not have a guest. We do not have the over-unders this week. I wasn't able to schedule things right. Next week we'll get back on it though. But for now, today, we're going to fill the Coming in Clutch segment with, not the over-under segment with a ton of listener questions. We put in a bunch of bonus ones here. So let's get into it. The first one's going to be, what do I do with Ja'Marr Chase? Sell or hold to see if he gets a new quarterback? So look, it's really difficult because it just depends on your league. I hate to say that, but it depends on your league. Maybe put Ja'Marr Chase in the trade block. Maybe send out a couple of offers and see what you get. Right now, I value Ja'Marr Chase as a higher end wide receiver 2. Obviously, that sucks because his talent says he's a top 5 wide receiver. But the situation currently, as it stands, makes him a borderline high end wide receiver 2. Like that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of fantasy points. Because at the end of the day, you could say Ja'Marr Chase is all the talent in the world. If he's not scoring you wide receiver 1 levels of fantasy points, you shouldn't rank him as a wide receiver 1. It's kind of that simple, right? We want fantasy points. We care about talent. We care about opportunity. But we want fantasy points at the end of the day. And if Ja'Marr Chase is not going to do that in this situation, which it's not his fault, it's just not going to happen. So looking at Chase, I think he's a fair ranked rest of season as like a top 15 to 20 wide receiver. If you can get that kind of value, go for it. Like right now, I would trade Ja'Marr Chase, and I think you can get Quentin Johnson plus in fantasy football right now, and I would absolutely do that. Quentin Johnson looks like a legit asset. If you can trade Ja'Marr Chase for Rome Odunze, I would absolutely do that. And I think these are trades that a lot of people would make right now. And here's the thing. Jake Browning could get better, or they could get a new QB1 in Cincinnati. But the only QB1s that we'd be looking at are Jameis Winston, that would be great. That could be really good. And that could shoot Ja'Marr Chase's value up really high. Or we can get someone like a Kirk Cousins, which might not be very good at all. Or maybe Mac Jones if Brock Purdy gets healthy, which I'm not sure if that'll be good at all. Like it's just a situation where unless we get Jameis, you're not going to feel good about the backup situation for Cincinnati anyway. So if you can sell for like top 15 prices at wide receiver, I'd be willing to do it. But otherwise, you're just kind of stuck and hoping for a new quarterback. Now, next question here. What is your best advice for 3-1, 4-0 teams? Best advice for 1-3 teams? Like, what's your best advice for teams that are dominating right now and teams that are just kind of they're bad? So for the winning teams, 4-0 teams out there, what is my advice for you? Do not let up on the gas, man. Keep pushing hard because fantasy football changes quick. These first 4 weeks are just the warm up. Everything's going to get crazier from here. Things are going to really solidify. Things are going to go concrete. Or players that were going off in the first 4 weeks are really struggling in the first 4 weeks, things are going to flip. The first couple of weeks are really a warm up for the NFL season, and then we get to see who these teams really are, and then it goes crazy. So be ready for that. So make some trades, make some waiver wire pickups, make some good additions, keep building your roster, keep making it better. And one thing I will add too, we just talked about a bunch of running backs I love to stash. If you're a team that's loaded, like you got a lot of players, you're feeling comfortable, and you've that one player on your bench that's like, I mean, like he's fine, but he probably won't ever make my starting lineup. Drop him for a handcuff that has some significant upside if a starter were to go down, like a Blake Corum, like a Brian Robinson, an Ollie Gordon, a Kendrick Miller, someone of that nature. Just get that guy on your roster so you can have a nice stash piece. Now, for my 1 and 3 teams out there, my own 4 teams out there, you're those teams that are dead last in the league right now. Look, man, you might have some injuries stacked up on you. You might have some things stacked against you right now. You just got to take it 1 week at a time. I would say make some trades, man. Take some risks. Trade for some players that are really risky right now. Trade for some serious buy low candidates. Go out and pay up for some players that you really think are to break out or have some serious good rest of season outlooks. Go and take some risks. Go and take some shots because at this point, 0-4, you got nothing to lose. So go big or go home. That's my biggest advice for these teams. Now, next thing, with Purdy, Lamar, Burrow out, and others out for due to injury and bye weeks, who is your favorite streaming quarterback this week? So I got 3 for you. Number 1 is Sam Darnold this week. I almost made him my come in and clutch quarterback of the week. I really like Sam Darnold. 2 out of 3 weeks, he's had 2+ passing touchdowns, 2 of the last 3 weeks, that is. And Tampa Bay is a really nice matchup for quarterbacks right now. I mean, we just saw Jalen Hurts have a really solid game against them for fantasy, even though he's not throwing the football a ton. But Tampa Bay secondary, they were absolutely terrible last year. They added some pieces, but still aren't looking good. And their offense is great. I mean, Mecca Buka looks fantastic right now. Baker Mayfield looks good. Chris Godwin, I know he didn't have a lot of catches, but he got very involved early, and I expect him to have a better game next week. And as the week go on, as he gets healthier, more acclimated, this offense is looking great. So this is a perfect storm for fantasy where you have a good offense and a bad defense. And that's the kind of team you want to start your fantasy options against. So Sam Darnold, who's already been productive this year, start him against Tampa Bay. Now, Matthew Stafford's my next one. He's had back-to-back games of 2+ passing touchdowns. He's had 3 games this year of 240+ yards in 4 games played. He's constantly productive. He has Devontae Adams. He has Puka Nacua. He has Jordan Whittington. He has a solid offensive line, as well as Kyron Williams and Blake Corum coming out of the backfield. This offense just works for fantasy football. And while Stafford doesn't run the football and doesn't give you the greatest ceiling, he gives you a really solid floor with touchdowns and passing volume. And looking at the San Francisco matchup, obviously with them losing all their weapons, this could be a potentially lower scoring game. But Stafford just so steady and so productive. And those of you who are losing quarterbacks due to injury, you're probably looking for someone that's steady. And Stafford is that kind of option. I think there's no way he's going to score you less than like 16 fantasy points in a normal scoring league. And I think he has the upside to give you like 24, 25 if he gives you like a nice 2 or 3 touchdown week. Now, let's head to my last one is C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud really started to put together last week. He was completing 70+% of his passes last week. Looks like he really looked the part. Nico Collins was good. They got everybody involved. Woody Marks out of the backfield really started to bring some juice to this offense. And now you got a defense with Baltimore who have some serious injuries, have played terrible all year, especially in the secondary side, and have really let up some fantasy points to quarterbacks. They're bottom 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed, in terms of passing yards allowed, bottom 10 in terms of passing touchdowns allowed. Like, this team just sucks against the fantasy football quarterback position. So C.J. Stroud is somebody that after a really good week in week 4, you can absolutely go out and play him in week 5. It was really nice to see him start to put things together after a really slow start to the season. Now, last question here before I wrap up the show. What player are people not buying enough into yet? What player is starting super hot that people are not hyped up enough about? I've got 2 wide receivers here for you. Number 1 is Rome Odunze, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. I feel like people are not hyped enough about this kid. Second-year wide receiver. Obviously, he was drafted in the top 10. He was drafted to be a superstar, and we are seeing that on the NFL field right now. People will look at his stat sheets, look at his box score, and read that he's on pace for 22 touchdowns this year. He's had a lot of touchdowns to start the year. And they will immediately point at that and say, oh, it's a fluky production. It's not going to last. It's just, you're completely ignoring the fact that he's completely established himself as the wide receiver 1 of this Bears offense. He's earning a 27% target share. That is a top 15 number in the league right now. And when you look at the targets that he's getting them at every area of the field. short, intermediate, behind the line of scrimmage, intermediate ranges, and then downfield. He's making plays at every area. And when you look against man, against zone, press, it doesn't matter. He is beating every single coverage that you throw at him. He is a dominant alpha wide receiver one, and Caleb Williams seems to have a great connection with him, unlike any other receiver on this offense so far this year. And also, you add on the fact that DJ Moore is a potential trade candidate. That just a cherry on top of how good Rome Odunze could be for fantasy football this year. Like I said, I think you could trade Jamar Chase for him. I think you can trade, a solid wide receiver 2 piece for him right now. And I value him more like towards wide receiver 1 rest of season. Now, let's look at Quentin Johnson too. The dude's a baller. That dude's a baller. I mean, his rookie year was bad. But the second year, I talked about this in the offseason, he had kind of a breakout. 711 yards, 8 touchdowns. We knew this kid coming in was a project, and now we're seeing the project pay off after 3 seasons. The kid is balling, and there's no after last week, there is no other Chargers receiver I'd rather have in fantasy football than Quentin Johnston. He is a monster right now. And I wouldn't say I'm valuing him as like a top 5 receiver rest of season, but he's absolutely in the top 12 to 15 conversation right now. Like he's right there amongst the wide receiver ones. He's scoring so many touchdowns. And obviously that touchdown pace likely won't continue, but he's such a red zone threat. He's such a big play threat in any situation, especially against man coverage. I mean, we just saw him like whoop Pat Surtain's butt. I mean, you go back and watch the All-22 film, every single play that Pat Surtain was lineman Quentin Johnston, it was genuinely impossible to cover Quentin Johnston, dude. Like it was quite a battle. Like Quentin Johnson and Quentin Johnson won it, man. He was a great player against Pat Surtain that week. Awesome to see that against a top tier corner in this league. Like Johnson's legit, man. I don't care about the drops. I don't care about anything that we've seen from him before. He's come out this year in year 3 and played like an absolute baller. And I love to see it. So buy Quentin Johnston, man. I would go out and trade for him, even buy high. I don't care. Go get him. But that's going to be all for this episode of Hutch Coming in Clutch today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Greatly, greatly appreciate you. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm at HutchinsonB_FF. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you'll be notified every single time a new episode does drop. And don't forget to check me out on Football Guys. And don't forget to have a great week in your fantasy football leagues. I wish you all the best of luck in your fantasy football lineups. If you need me on Twitter, you need to answer start sit questions, go ahead and DM me. Go ahead and tag me in your tweets. I'll be available to answer start sit questions throughout the weekend. And make sure you check me out on the Football Guys Discord. I'll be hanging out on there on multiple different channels, answering all your start sit questions that you need to be answered. See y'all around. Have a great football weekend, everybody.